Hello, and welcome back to the Cinema Lounge, where we just chill and talk about movies. I am your host, Garrett Inman, and today we are talking about Iron Man 2, continuing our little journey through the MCU, revisiting some of the older movies, working our way up to the more recent stuff, kind of reframing my opinions a little bit on some of these movies because I haven't seen them in a while. So our next stop is Iron Man 2. But first, how are y'all doing today? I'm okay. I'm very tired. My schedule has suddenly just gotten incredibly busy with schoolwork, getting into some film production classes that require a lot of build-up and pre-production stuff, then production, then post-production, on top of, my 2 paid jobs and then my volunteer position, and it's becoming a lot. So I'm kind of perpetually exhausted at this point, so if I just start sounding a little befuddled, I suppose, or if I just sound like a loon, that's the why. I'm just exhausted and tired. It is currently 9:00 p.m. Sunday the 12th. This episode is set to go out in 12 hours, so I gotta get all this stuff exported. It's fine. I'm enjoying myself. I don't feel overwhelmed. I don't feel stressed. It's just kind of this constant state of, oh, well, we got this to do. And I think for me, I work best when I have a busy schedule, just not to make it too busy. So, I guess life update, I don't know. How are you doing? Let me know by, I don't know, emailing me or texting me, letting us know on the Instagram or the comments section, whatever. I don't know. Before we get into our conversation about Iron Man 2, let's talk about some of the headlines this week. There were quite a few things that happened, but the stuff that stood out to me, let's jump to Shang-Chi first. I talked about it last week. I gave a mostly positive review. It is definitely going to be one of those movies the more I sit on it, the more, let's not say negative, but the more things I'll find wrong with it, or the more things that will bother me as time goes on. So whenever I revisit it, once we get caught up to it, we'll see how I feel at that point. But I still feel positive about it. I've seen some reviews that have been pretty negative, and I disagree with some of what they say, but then I go, well, they got him there, something like that. So we'll see how my opinion changes on a second rewatch later on down the line, because so far my opinions on these MCU movies have changed on a rewatch after some time has passed. But I bring up Shang-Chi because over Labor Day weekend, its opening weekend, it broke box office record, an actual record, not one of these fake made-up records. It broke Labor Day weekend records. I think previously it was 37 million held by Rob Zombie's Halloween in 2007. So this has been a pretty long-standing record. The reason it's been so low, Shang-Chi got 90 million, which is still not a lot. It's not the best, but it's a solid opening showing, especially during a time when no one's going to the theaters. But the reason that is Labor Day is usually one of the worst weekends to put out a movie because everyone's going to the lake, everyone's kind of just relaxing. We're shifting out of summer, going back to school. Everyone's got school stuff to do. Everyone's kind of just going back to the daily grind. Coming off of summer, everyone's kind of worn out from the summer blockbusters. But this summer, we didn't really have a lot. We had Black Widow, F9, Free Guy. So it's been a slow summer. People were kind of jonesing for a new movie, and it didn't hurt that this was a theater exclusive. This wasn't on Disney Plus like Black Widow was, which severely hurt its numbers. It had a good opening weekend, and then it dropped something like 50-60% in terms of its return because people were buying it on Disney Plus. So I guess congratulations to Shang-Chi. We'll see how it does this weekend. As of recording, we haven't gotten the money reports back because it's Sunday, not Monday, but we'll get it back probably around the time I release the episode tomorrow. So we'll see. I think it's on track to at least break even. I think its budget was something like 150 million, if I remember right, and I think the standard is that that studios spend the budget of the movie's worth in ads, which is probably also why we didn't get a lot of advertising for the movie leading up to this. But I think that's usually the total is they break even if they make twice their budget. So we'll see if they get there. It seems like they're probably going to be on track unless it has if it does something like Black Widow where the returns just drop off in the next week. But we'll see. It could be another situation like Free Guy, where Free Guy was getting steady money, box office income with each weekend, and stayed number one of couple weekends in a row. So we'll have to see. Because I know this has caused a lot of friction, a lot of people yelling at each other, and frankly, on one hand, I get I get rant or pulling for Disney to lose. Disney's not a good corporation. I have gone on record as on in terms of my opinions about Disney as the company. Not really a fan of them or kind of the direction I guess the MCU is kind of heading in terms of what their priorities are. But it's something where, because of all that kind of negativity and this pulling for Disney to lose, has now created a bit of a pushback now that they've broken the Labor Day weekend, and now everyone's kind of prematurely celebrating, and now it's just kind of, we'll have to see. But, yeah, we'll see how the movie does. If you ask me, I personally would recommend the movie. I think it's a solid film. I don't think it's like top 10 MCU so far. But if you want my in-depth thoughts on it, check out last week's episode, and I'll go more in depth there. I don't want to spend too much time on it. Just kind of a notable thing, because Labor Day is a traditionally really bad weekend to release a movie. That's usually when you put a movie if you've given up on it and you don't want to wait until January. So, good on them there. Moving on from there, we had some really big game news. I'm not like a mega gamer, but as you can see there, I got a plush of a Froakie behind me. If you don't know what a Froakie is, it is a Pokemon. I'm a very big Pokemon nerd. If you know me, you probably know that I have played just about every generation from Generation 4. So I'm pretty big into that space, and I'm getting more into kind of other games. I got a PS4. I've played like God of War, which I think it's the 2018 God of War game, and it is one of my favorite games I've ever played. I've played stuff like that, Injustice 2. So I'm having a good time kind of familiarizing myself with some of the classics. I've played all the Uncharted games. Fantastic video games right there. So I'm getting more into the video game space. We had some game reveals. First off, we're going to have another God of War video game, so I can't wait for that, because that game franchise is kind of epic, and I love it. But we also got a reveal of some stills and stuff of Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy video game. I think it's a Telltale, maybe. I don't remember. But I'm excited for that. If it's like if it's kind of like you get to play as the Guardians of the Galaxy, I think that'll be fun. We got some reveals for Spider-Man 2, not the movie, but the video game sequel to the fantastic PS4 game. It'll be a PS5 exclusive. Venom will be the villain, and he will be voiced by Tony Todd, which sounds epic. Love it. then we had a reveal trailer for a Wolverine game, which I don't think anyone knew about, which is awesome. I would love to play as Wolverine. I think we had the Wolverine Origins video game, and if I remember right, it was a part of the trend of an atrocious movie making a really good video game. So I kind of can't wait for this. I think it's like an Old Man Logan type situation, which sounds exciting. And then finally, we are getting a Knights of the Old Republic remake, which I think that's what I'm most excited for. I haven't played Knights of the Old Republic, but I've heard it's really good. That's where we got like Darth Revan from. By the way, Knights of the Old Republic is a Star Wars video game. It is probably one of, if not the most popular Star Wars video game, besides maybe like Battlefront 2 or Force Unleashed. And people have been championing Knights of the Old Republic something, either a new game or make a movie or TV show. And we're finally getting some Knights content. It takes place, I want to say it takes place 500 years before the events of the prequels. So this is kind of it's kind of a prequel to the prequels, which is exciting. For people really love Darth Revan, and I think there's like a robot that people like in there, so it's gonna be fun. I hope this is like a really good game, updated graphics, that kind of stuff. Next, I think we had quite a few trailers come out this week. There was like a Last Night in Soho trailer from Edgar Wright, stuff like that. I don't remember all of them, but the big one, we got a trailer from Matrix Resurrections. First off, ingenious teaser trailer marketing where they had that website where you can click on red pill or blue pill and it would give you a unique trailer based off what pill you clicked at what time you clicked it. And it was really cool. Just going randomly to the website and clicking one of the pills, and then they released the full trailer. As someone who's never seen the Matrix movies, I've only read the script for the first one. That is a very film student thing to say, but I've read the script for the first one. It's a good script. I haven't actually seen the movie, but as someone who's like not a Matrix person, I thought the trailer looked pretty dope. Neil Patrick Harris seems to be kind of this villainous role. I don't know why Lawrence Fishburne isn't in it. It seems like he's getting replaced by the dude who played Black Manta, and he's in Candyman. And I can't for the life of me remember his name because it's like three words and then the third. He has a very long name. But it seems good. I think it'll be a fun time. And finally, we got Christopher Nolan. We got some information on his new movie. And as a Nolan boy, as a Christopher Nolan fan, I'm kind of excited about this. We're going to get another new movie from Nolan that will be set in World War II. I think Dunkirk was also set in World War II. So this is going to be exciting. But we're not going to see it for a hot second because Nolan decided he didn't want to work for Warner Brothers anymore, probably after the whole Tenet thing. So he's shopping his new movie around. So if you got a buttload of cash, fund this man's movie, and you're going to make a lot of money. But yeah, that was kind of the headlines that stuck out to me this week. Let's get into kind of the main meat of why you came here today and why I'm recording this at 9 o'clock at night. Barely awake. I have homework that's due tomorrow, but hey, let's get into it. Iron Man 2. This probably won't be a super long episode because unlike Iron Man, which I felt was a very rich movie, plus I had Brock on, so it was a conversation talking about kind of the thematic richness or some of the elements that really worked, or with Incredible Hulk, kind of talking about how I actually enjoyed it. Like, I went in expecting to hate it, but I ended up enjoying it, and then comparing it to Black Widow. This is a movie that is very simple. There's not a lot to talk about in terms of thematic stuff, in terms of just stuff that I really loved. I'm not going to like gush over this movie. I I very much expected to just kind of be all right with it, and it just I kind of came out conflicted. So in some ways, I liked it more than I thought I would, but in some ways, I disliked it more than I thought I would. First off, some things I noticed. I did not know Justin Theroux wrote this movie. If you don't know who Justin Theroux is, he's an actor. He's not really known for screenplays. He's only written 4 or 5 movies. I know he wrote Tropic Thunder, which is a good movie. I'd recommend that. He wrote this. Then he wrote Rock of Ages, which is just kind of big blockbuster Hollywood comedy. I've seen the end of it. I've seen like the last 30 minutes, and it's all right. It's kind of just a jukebox rock musical. And then he wrote Zoolander 2. That is his writing credits. So he has written for some, like, I guess, higher profile comedy movies, and then this, which is a strange choice for a screenwriter for a big blockbuster Marvel movie that's supposed to set up a lot of future Marvel projects and to set up a universe. I would figure you would want to get someone who's experienced or someone who has gained notoriety through their storytelling, not a guy who writes kind of trashy comedies. And I'm saying this as a fan of Tropic Thunder, but let's be honest, its storytelling is not like great. It's kind of simple, which as is this movie. So I noticed that was kind of strange to read. I was like, I just wanted to check it was the same Justin Theroux. He also starred in The Leftovers. He's been in, I think, either Parks and Rec or The Office a few times. He gets around. You've definitely seen him. So I noticed that was strange. And then also, there were some weird cameos. I did not realize some people were actually already in the MCU. I know people had fan casted some of these guys. But first, Olivia Munn shows up towards the beginning of the movie as a reporter. That completely caught me off guard. She was in the new Predator movie. She was Psylocke in Age of Apocalypse. She's been in some also trashy comedy movies. But that kind of caught me off guard because I think people had been wanting her to be in the MCU. Have been trying to fan cast her in some stuff, and lo and behold, she's been in the MCU as some throwaway reporter character. Then next was Kate Mara, who was some random lawyer who served Tony towards the beginning. You would know her as Rooney Mara's little sister. She also starred in the fantastic Fan Forstic movie. I say that in all jest. I haven't actually seen it, but she starred in that as the Invisible Woman. She's been in some other stuff, so it was weird seeing her just kind of pop up in this movie. And then the two that kind of caught me off guard, Elon Musk shows up in a Marvel movie in 2010 at the racetrack. Tony bumps into him, and I'm gonna go, wait, hold up, is that Elon Musk? Is that Elon Musk? Long before his SNL days and his Joe Rogan podcast appearances and the Tesla cars and the people screaming at him on the internet and other people defending him with their lives, long before he smoked pot with Rick and Morty, he was in Iron Man 2. I did not realize he was that big in 2010 to be put in a Marvel movie. So that completely threw me off. And then the other thing that threw me off towards the end, they include a news segment. And usually when these big Hollywood movies include news segments, they're going to include CNN, MSNBC, CBS, like more left-leaning, and more left-leaning news sources, because Hollywood is generally more left-leaning than of center. So they usually use that. A lot of actors and a lot of studio execs do not like people on Fox News or stuff like that. So that's why it caught me completely off guard that Bill O'Reilly shows up in the movie in a news podcast or a news segment talking about Pepper Potts and Tony Stark. And I was like, hold on, is that Bill O'Reilly? We showing the no spin factor or whatever that the thing was called. It's like, okay, well that caught me off guard because I think that's probably the only movie in Hollywood Bill O'Reilly ever got paid to be in. So that was interesting, I guess. So there are 4 cameos or small roles from notable people who I guess I just completely forgot were in this movie. Granted, I watched this movie before I probably knew who 3 out of 4 of them were. So there's that, but still, like that kind of took me back. But yeah, let's talk about. I'm generally negative on this movie. So let's talk about stuff that I liked. First off, Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man still does a good job. He fits the role. He looks the part. He plays it elegantly. So there's that. Nick Fury, it's good to see him show up. Samuel L. Jackson, it was like born to play that role because Nick Fury, the ultimate Nick Fury, was born to basically be Samuel L. Jackson before he got brought into the 616 continuity. It was good to see Coulson again, especially after all this time, after he died in the Avengers and then he died in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and then I guess he's now an LMD out there walking around. Spoilers for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I guess, if you really cared about going in and seeing that show blind. I figured if you cared to watch the show, you would have seen it. If you didn't, you're not gonna. But it was good to see Coulson again. I thought Scarlett Johansson was pretty solid in her role, although it was a very shallow role in terms of she was just kind of there to look pretty and then just kind of beat people up. She was kind of just a generic strong silent type that, so her character wasn't the best, but she played it well, I guess. Let's see. There were 3 scenes that I really enjoyed. 3 scenes that I think, maybe not like top 10 scenes from the MCU, but I definitely think these are some of the better scenes in the MCU, some of the most memorable things. I really liked the Senate hearing. I kind of just liked how Tony was publicly dumping on the government. What was his name? Senator Stearns or whatever his name was. It was just so smarmy, and he was trying to do gotchas on Tony, and Tony just kept going around it. The introduction of Justin Hammers in this scene, and he was great. Don Cheadle as Rhodey, comes in and is introduced to replace Terrence Howard, which, after seeing both the movies, granted, I haven't rewatched the rest, I really wish we got Terrence Howard as War Machine instead of Don Cheadle, but Don Cheadle does a good job, and I love how one of his first lines is, "It's me, I'm here, deal with it." Basically, I don't know if this was directly for the audience, but I just kind of found it funny that it was, hey, it's me, Don Cheadle, I'm here, deal with it. It's not Terrence Howard no more. I found that funny. But yeah, the other scene, I thought the scene at the racing place, the racetrack, that's what it's called. I thought the racetrack scene was actually really good. Besides my maybe one nitpick where Whiplash has Tony at his mercy, and instead of going, he just goes jump ropes them, and he goes, and then he starts to go for it, giving Tony enough time to jump out of the way. Besides that, it was a really good scene that balanced humor, intensity, and suspense pretty well, where Whiplash just gets freaking knocked into with a truck and he's still alive, and they're trying to ram into him, and he starts attacking them. Justin Hammer just kind of being there to watch it was great. And then the other scene is just the Justin Hammer gun show scene where he's introducing these bad boys, and he's this one's a little too urban for you. Well, we got this bad boy. We got this minigun. They call it the Dragon or whatever. And then he ends it with the bunker buster, and he said, this thing will destroy any bunker you fire it at. What did he say? It's gorgeous yet elegant, but it can destroy an entire civilization if it wanted to. I call it the ex-wife. Like that's such a good line. Oh my gosh. And that's gonna be my final positive is Justin effin Hammer. That's exactly what I wrote. Justin Hammer. I did not realize there was such an underground community of people that loved him. Because when I first watched this movie, I didn't really remember Justin Hammer all that much. But there's been this growing community. I know like Nando Loves Movies has been a big like Justin Hammer fan. And there's just kind of this underground community of people who love Justin Hammer, think he's one of the best villains in the MCU. And I might agree with them. Justin Hammer is so freaking good. Sam Rockwell, like, come on, you need to bring him back at the very. He's such a good actor. He plays this role really well, where he's just kind of, he's this smarmy businessman, but he's full of himself, but he's also a loser. So he's kind of endearing, where literally everything he does against Tony fails. He's not as good as Tony at building weapons or suits. So he just kind of gets the B grade stuff. They constantly crap on him, but he still acts as if he's on the top of the world. He acts as if he's the best person in the room, the smartest person in the room. And it's just, that's such an endearing quality where he clearly sucks, but he's just like, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to roll with it. Just the writing for him I thought was the best in this movie. And I wish we got to see more of him. I think Justin Hammer was a very entertaining villain. I think in the comics he's might be like a B grade Iron Man villain who's kind of similar in terms of he always fails. He always sucks at doing what he's trying to do. And he might even have become a super villain at some point, which would be fun if they kept Iron Man alive. But at this point, it's not even worth bringing him back. But still, Justin effin Hammer. Oh my gosh. Hands down the best part of this movie, in my opinion. And I wish at some point we get to see him again besides some one-shot Return of the King. So, that's all I have to say in terms of the good stuff. Here's the thing. Besides those three scenes, I think the first maybe 30 minutes of this movie are pretty good. Like, I remember this movie being kind of mediocre. We'll see. I originally gave it like a 6 out of 10. And the first 30 minutes, I was like, okay, I might need to rethink this because this movie's actually pretty solid. And then we just kind of get into the plot line of Tony having the puzzle disease on his neck, and he just randomly creates a new a new element because he saw his father's Tomorrowland demonstration. His father was getting like massive Walt Disney vibes in this movie, but he sees his father's like Tomorrowland presentation or whatever, and he's suddenly just inspired to create a new element from that somehow. And it's just kind of like he just inexplicably is, oh well, we'll just create a new element by putting because of this, and then I'll put pipes in my wall and we'll just make a new element because and I'll put it in my chest. And it just seemed like a very unnecessary plotline, and anytime the movie kind of dealt with that, I got super disinterested. The second act, I think after the racetrack scene, they arrest Whiplash, he breaks out of prison. I think that's the last scene I was really into for a while, until the Justin Hammer gun show scene. Between those two scenes, I was thoroughly bored, super disinterested. And honestly, I could not tell you a single thing that happens. I know Whiplash starts going like, I want my board. And I know that's like a meme for this movie. And it only happens in like 2 scenes. He doesn't even get his effing bird. I completely forgot that. Man doesn't even get his bird, and it's like no point of contention. It was just written in there as a joke, and then nothing comes from it. I think the worst scene in this movie is Tony and Rhodey. Is Tony's birthday bash, where he's like drunk off his mind. And I think what makes it worse, the scene preceding it, he's talking to Natasha, Black Widow, and he's like, if you knew you were going to die and this was going to be your last day on Earth, your last birthday on Earth, what would you do? And she said, I would live it to the fullest with the people I love. And I was like, oh, so this should lead into him basically having this big party, but trying to spend time with Rhodey and Pepper and Coulson and Nick Fury or whoever. But instead, it's just him getting drunk and like entertaining these masses of barely clothed people. He pees in his suit, which was just, we didn't need that. And then him and Rhodey fight, and Tony just gets super unlikable. They start like beating each other up to the Robot Rock by Daft Punk, which I just kind of found funny a little bit. But Tony just was so unlikable, and that was probably like his worst scene in any of these movies in terms of just his character. And I think they were trying to do the demon in a bottle plot line. In the comics, I say this as a comic toddler. I'll be a toddler now. There was a plot line in the Iron Man comics. I think I read a little bit of them. I read the first 100 or so Iron Man comics, but there's a plot line where Tony starts struggling with alcoholism, and that starts damaging his relationships with Pepper and with Happy and his friends. And I think they were trying to do something like that. The demon in the bottle plotline, from what I remember, was portrayed more seriously than it was in this movie. And once again, that's probably Justin Theroux writing, being a comedy writer rather than a drama writer. So it just felt weird and awkward. So it just was done poorly. I think if they gave it more seriousness, that the seriousness it deserved, and got rid of the whole, oh, I'm being poisoned by the palladium in my arc reactor. If they kind of got rid of that plot line and just have him tinkering around with the arc reactor in the background, like, hey, I think at some point this is going to kill me, so I'm going to mess around experiment until I find a new element or whatever, and give him that, I guess. But in terms of that plot line was wasteful. So just like kind of cut it back and give proper time to the demon in the bottle plotline. Have Tony start out the movie as kind of this party animal who likes to drink, but his drinking is motivated by I don't know, something to do with his father, something to do with maybe if you want to use the puzzle neck virus thing. Maybe he just sees his own mortality and has accepted it and has gone, F it, I'm just going to drink some more to try to waste away. That would be something that could be interesting that you could do. But instead, they kind of play it off as a joke in the Robot Rock fight scene. That's what I'm going to call it now. And it just didn't have that weight to it. And there's my dog. She is outside barking. Fun. She loves barking late at night. But yeah, it could have been done so much better, and it wasn't, because there was just so much happening in this. And I think ultimately that's the biggest problem. There's too much happening. They're trying to do, Tony creates a new element for the puzzle virus on his neck. Demon in the bottle plot line. Rhodey becoming War Machine. Justin Hammer trying to compete with Tony. Whiplash on his revenge quest. Trying to introduce more Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to kind of build that out and set up future Marvel movies, and it just became this kind of cluster of, there's really good stuff in here that I did not hate, but holy crap, there's some stuff that's just boring, and then there's the Robot Rock scene, which I think is straight up just bad. And that's, I think, the ultimate problem with this movie. The other problem is Whiplash. I think Whiplash has a solid origin, being the son of whatever his name is, Vanko, and this guy who got screwed over by Howard Stark, got deported, and Ivan is holding this grudge towards the Stark family, and how they kind of set this up to thematically basically be these two guys who are products of their fathers' values and the way their fathers built things. and these two guys basically fighting over their father's legacy and fighting their father's fights. That was interesting theming that was never explored for a couple of reasons. A, this movie's bloated, but B, Whiplash shows up at the beginning of the movie. He is a pertinent threat. And then when he breaks out of prison, there's an explosion and everyone thinks he died when he really didn't. So the middle of the movie is just Tony being a douchebag, an a-hole, and Whiplash arguing with Justin Hammer about getting his board. I want my board. Um, and that's pretty much the middle of the movie, and that's why there's no agency. There's nothing really interesting to me because there's no pertinent threat. Whiplash is just kind of chilling, making drones for Justin, and eventually he's like, "Oh, I'm going to betray you so I can kill Tony Stark." But we don't know that Ivan Vanko's alive until the expo, towards the end of the movie. So there's just kind of the giant part of us not really caring because Whiplash is just kind of chilling. And if Whiplash had more agency and made himself known sooner, it would have been more interesting. Also, the whips are a little much. I mean, I know Whiplash is a character in the comics, and I don't know exactly how he uses the whips. You could probably have shown the whips off in a more intimidating way because, like I said, he had to do the jump rope thing as if he's building up the whip. I think it would have been more useful as a weapon and more intimidating if he had a gauntlet or something that shot the whip out and he could kind of manipulate it that way, and then that way his hands are free. So if he whips Tony and it wraps around him, suddenly he has a free hand. He could maybe have a gun or something, and then bang bang or whatever. That's maybe just me ranting, or speculating, but in terms of just the whips, they are slightly goofy, but it is cool because it feels DIY a little bit. Like he definitely created these in a rundown home in Russia. So there's kind of a give and take there, I suppose. And then Mickey Rourke, I feel, was definitely miscast or misdirected or something because he's a good actor. I just don't think his performance here was great. I feel like Mickey Rourke could have definitely been a different MCU character. He could have probably played any of the criminal Marvel villains. He could have been I don't know, probably could have made a run at Kingpin if he wanted to, but he could probably have been someone like Silvermane or Clue Master. I'm naming some of the Spider-Man stuff off, but he could have done that. He could have been the Punisher, maybe. But having him be Whiplash just kind of felt weird. I don't know. His accent was okay. The opening scene where his dad dies and he just he seems sad, but then just goes like felt very Sylvester Stallone, not in a later Rocky movie, not caring all that much. So he could have been directed a bit better, and that's probably another reason why Whiplash as a character did not work quite for me. He is definitely one of the weaker main villains in an MCU movie. And yeah, it's definitely just, I guess the final bad is just there was no agency for most of the movie, and it just felt like it was setting up all the other Marvel stuff. I mean, you had the map at the end that people were speculating with. There was the marks in most likely Wakanda for Black Panther, middle of the ocean for Namor the Submariner. There was one in New Jersey. I don't know who that could have been. One in, I think, New Zealand, or no, in Greenland, and I think there's one maybe somewhere in Asia. So that was supposed to oh, I wonder who these characters could be. But as a whole, this movie just felt boring. The beginning I thought was solid. The end was okay, and then the middle was just completely boring. There are 3 or 4 scenes that I thought were really good and stand out, and there was one character I thought was consistently amazing. I consistently loved, and I want to see more of him. And I guess the final point I'm going to say, I think they're retroactively saying this, but there's a guy credited as Tin Ring's goon or something who gives Whiplash his passports to get into the country so he can get into the racetrack. So I guess retrospectively, the Mandarin was acting against Tony Stark this whole time, and apparently there are some tie-in comics where Tony's been fighting the Tin Rings between Iron Man 1 and 2. That's interesting. I just wish we had the real Mandarin fighting Tony in Iron Man 3 rather than pretend, because the Mandarin is the arch enemy of Tony Stark. This is something I've sat on too. It kind of sucks because if you look at the trilogy as a whole of Iron Man didn't really get to fight some of his more notable villains. I mean, yeah, Ironmonger was pretty necessary. My philosophy with superhero trilogies is I think the first movie our hero should fight someone who's very similar to themselves in terms of personality or values or basically representing the worst of whatever they are, so they can fight to overcome it and become something better. Iron Man, Tony fought Obadiah Stane, Ironmonger, someone who was a ruthless businessman, someone who sold and manufactured weapons and didn't really have remorse about what he did. And he was just an extreme version of Tony, and Tony had to fight him to overcome him and become more selfless, realize that selling weapons isn't the best thing for the world. So something like that. And then the second movie, in my opinion, it should be the absolute polar opposite of what our character represents. So Batman would fight Joker, law and order versus lawlessness and chaos. Ideally, this would be our arch nemesis. So Iron Man would ideally, I guess, fight Mandarin. However, I would make an exception because I think the third film should be our hero's ultimate threat, something that will push them beyond the brink, the most powerful villain they've ever fought. And the Mandarin would definitely have served to that if it was comic book Mandarin. So if I think how the trilogy should have gone is Ironmonger definitely for Iron Man 1. Iron Man 2, I don't know if Whiplash was the best character to use as the main villain. I still want to keep out Justin Hammer because he's basically kind of this weird, like this, not evil Tony Stark, but just kind of this alternative version of Tony. And I think it would have been interesting to have included a different villain rather than Whiplash. Because I know Titanium Man and Crimson Dynamo are pretty popular, and I think they could have been more interesting. Crimson Dynamo is also Russian, so they could have definitely used him. They basically have the same plot line except have characters that them trying to make different Iron Man suits would make sense. Crimson Dynamo I think would have worked perfectly. Titanium Man is too. If you haven't heard that song, there's a song about Titanium Man out there. I think it's Magneto and Titanium Man, maybe. Definitely give that a look up and a listen. I think it's a solid song. I haven't listened to it a hot second, but from what I remember it being a solid song. And I just was like, oh, there's a random song out there that talks about a lower level Marvel villain, which is funny. But I think those two are some of Iron Man, Tony's biggest villains in his arsenal, and I kind of wish they got the spotlight over Whiplash. I get Whiplash, I think, is relatively popular, but I feel like for the thematic things they were going for, it would have been much better to just replace him with the Crimson Dynamo, using the Crimson Dynamo outfit, something that isn't like 100% similar to the Iron Man suit, but something that looks I think it looks more kind of medieval-ish, I guess. A lot less human. Also, the crimson, I think, would pop out well against kind of the more scarlet red or the red and silver, making it kind of this deep, dark blood red. Right, something like that I think would be visually interesting. Or they could have gone with Titanium Man, who wears a gray and silver, or a green and silver suit, which would have contrasted pretty decently with the reds of our heroes. But yeah, that's kind of my rant on Whiplash, I suppose. And then, of course, the third movie when we get to it. Ideally, I would have had the real Mandarin come in as our final boss, arch nemesis, stronger than anything Tony's ever faced, including aliens. In tying in the alien aspect, showing that the world has changed since the invasion of New York, I think would have been a lot more interesting. Even though I think the original take of Ben Kingsley's Mandarin, of him being this modern day, I don't think you can say, a modern day Terry, a modern day Bin Laden, worked well as well. But that's just me, I guess. But yeah, overall, I did not enjoy this movie as much as the first time around. Let me just go and say this. Here's the bottom line on Iron Man 2. Ultimately, this is a movie I really wanted to like more than I did. This movie gave us some great moments, like the Senate hearing and the race track scene and the Justin Hammer gun show. And it gave us memorable characters, from Justin Hammer to Black Widow, giving us more of characters we loved. Tony Stark, Nick Fury, Coulson. But it definitely had this stink of Marvel manipulation and lack of agency that just dragged it down. I feel that if Favreau had been given free reign, and if we got maybe a different screenwriter, no knock against Justin Theroux, we could have gotten something that could have been great, something maybe even on par with the first Iron Man movie, but unfortunately, that's not what happened. And after the first 30 minutes, I was kind of checked out from most of the rest of the movie, because it just felt dull and slow. 5 out of 10. Still my second least favorite MCU movie as of right now. That could definitely change as we work our way through the rest of the MCU movies. At some point, I think next up is Thor. I don't think I'm going to do that next week. I don't want to make every weekend or every week an MCU week. I want to talk about other movies, but just because it had been a little bit from the Incredible Hulk, might as well talk about it. So, in my existing rankings of the MCU movies, we have talked about here on the podcast. So I'm going to go ahead and rank them real quick off the top of my head. Number 1 would be Iron Man, then Shang-Chi, then, let me think. I think I'm going to stick by what I said in the episode with the Incredible Hulk. Then the Incredible Hulk, Black Widow, and then Iron Man 2. I don't, the more I sit on Black Widow, the less I like it. So, there you go. Iron Man 2 is, as of right now, my least favorite MCU movie out of the ones we've talked about. I will let you know when we get to my actual least favorite, which had kind of gone back and forth with Iron Man 2 before this, but ultimately I decided to put Iron Man 2 above it. Maybe on a rewatch, I will like it more. You're going to have to check out every episode I talk about an MCU movie to figure out which MCU movie is my least favorite and which MCU movie is going to end up being my favorite. But yeah, tune in next time. The next time I talk about an MCU movie, it'll be Thor, then we'll go to Captain America, the First Avenger, then the Avengers, and then maybe we'll do like a Phase 1 review. Maybe. We'll see. Then we'll go through Phase 2, and then Phase 3, and hopefully we'll catch up with Phase 4 by the time it's wrapping up with, what's the last? I think it's Ant-Man Quantumania, and we'll try to catch up with it by that point. So yeah, there's that. Let's wrap it up. Let's wrap this episode up. We're about 49 minutes into this. I'm tired as crap. I still got to export this, work on some homework, so priorities, right? We're going to skip the release radar this week, and I think we're just going to stop doing that because it's not a lot of work, but it's just kind of tedious to try to find the posters for the new movies or the new shows or whatever. And, it's not that big of a deal. If you really want to go see a movie, check out what's in theaters. I know Malignant has come out this weekend. James Wan, guy who directed Saw, Insidious. So, if you want to find new TV shows or whatever, I'll just recommend the stuff that I've personally like. And that stuff this week, we got the weekly recommendations. This past week, on top of all the homework, all the work, job work, volunteer work, podcast work, whatever, I spent my free time, which was usually at around 9 o'clock at night when I was trying to just kind of relax and go to bed. I've been revisiting movies from my childhood, just kind of been chilling on Disney Plus for a little bit, kind of just rewatching, mooching off my buddy's Disney Plus account and kind of rewatching movies that I grew up watching, including stuff like Homeward Bound, which was surprisingly actually pretty good, or revisiting Bolt, which I would have given a 9 out of 10 watching it as a child. Now I would probably give it a 7 out of 10, mostly because that animation is atrocious. But out of all of those movies that I revisited, or I watched for the first time, because I did miss out on some movies, I have picked 3 movies to recommend to you this week. First, I'm going to recommend the movie that I actually saw for the first time, and I was just curious and decided to check it out. And that's the Muppets movie. Or the Muppet movie, and not the one from like the 2010s. I've seen that movie. I haven't seen Most Wanted, but I've seen the other one. And I thought that was good. The one with Jason Segel and I think Amy Adams. I've seen that one. I did not watch this one this past week. I'm talking about the 1973 first ever movie made about the Muppets, the original classic, as it says on the poster here. It is one of the most meta movies I've ever seen. I love how a major plot point, or how, not a major plot point, but basically there's a scene where Kermit and Fozzie roll up to a church, and it's the Electric Mayhem, Dr. Teeth, Animal, and the gang. And they're like, oh, well, how'd you get all out here? And Kermit tries to start explaining it. Or no, Fozzie tries to start explaining it, and Kermit's like, no, Fozzie, the audience knows all that already. That was an awful Kermit. I'm sorry. Usually my Kermit's solid. Hold on. Fozzie. I'm screw it. I'm not going to do that. I'm having performance issues. But, Fozzie like, well, how are we going to tell them about it? And Kermit's just like, well, we'll have them read the script. Then he just pulls out the screenplay and hands it to him, and Dr. Teeth just starts reading the screenplay. It's a very meta movie, and it's basically just the Muppets gathering together to screen their very first movie that tells the story of how they made a movie. So it's pretty fun. I guess it's in that genre of movies that is a movie that's about making movies, but it's definitely not focused on the filmmaking stuff. It's definitely just Kermit doing a cross-country trip, meeting all these Muppets for the first time, some fun, memorable songs. You got Rainbow Connection, which is one of the most popular, if not the most popular Muppet song ever made. The reprise, I think, is really good. I really like Moving Right Along and its reprise. I really liked Ralph and Kermit's duet. There was some really fun cameos from various comedians of the time. You had Steve Martin and Richard Pryor pops up in a scene. Stuff like that. You have celebrities that I didn't recognize but looked them up and was like, oh, these were pretty big celebrities. Big Bird shows up in the movie at one point. It's a very fun, very meta movie. And I had a lot of fun. I think the ending is a little weak. I'm not a fan of how it ended. But everything else I thought was fun. The fact that this was just a cross-country trip where Kermit's chilling with his buddies, meeting his buddies for the first time. And then there's just a dude who sells frog legs chasing Kermit, trying to get Kermit to advertise for him. I thought it was a fun movie. Definitely a recommend for me. Next, we're going to go to Fox, because Disney bought Fox out. I watched this movie a lot when it first came out in 2014, and rewatching it, I think it still holds up. It's more traditional in its storytelling, but you know what? I think that's fine. It's Book of Life. If you haven't heard of it, it is basically the movie that people kept comparing Coco to. When Coco came out in 2018, people were like, "Oh, it's a ripoff of Coco." And like, on one hand, yes, there are a lot of strong themes, but also they're both the movies based off of a holiday. They'd be saying like every Hallmark movie's the same, which they are. um, but like, oh well, the Santa Claus is ripping off "It's a Wonderful Life" or something. The same skeletal structure, I guess, is there. But for the most part, these movies have very different feels. Coco's about, well, both of them are very much about family because that's what the Day of the Dead is about. But Coco kind of focuses on Coco discovering what his father was like. I think it was his father. And learning some of the skeletons in the closet while meeting his family he never got to meet, and learning the value of family, while the Book of Life is definitely a love story about this guy who's going to go to any lengths to get the woman or win over the woman he loves. But I mean, it stars Diego Luna, Zoe Saldana, and Channing Tatum, Ron Perlman. Really good voice cast. Ron Perlman voices, I guess, the main antagonist, Sibalba. But I mean, that's a great, like, one of my favorite character designs in an animated movie. I think it's charming. I love how it's kind of a jukebox musical. Like every musical segment is a pre-existing song, but a mariachi remix of it. Um, I I didn't realize that when I was rewatching it until they started singing. I think it was like a U2 song, and then suddenly there is this scene where Zoe Saldana's character is watching Diego Luna just play the guitar to himself. I was like, oh, this is a sweet little song. And then he just starts, I'm a creep. I'm a... It's just like, oh, they put in Radiohead in a Day of the Dead movie. Okay. So it's a very fun movie. I thought it was charming. I think my main issue is that there's a thief villain who does nothing. Like he's kind of just there to have the final fight. He just kind of inexplicably knows about Joaquin's metal somehow, and I don't know. I feel like that could have been fleshed out a bit, but besides that, I thought it was fun. But yeah, great movie. I would definitely recommend it. All this was on Disney Plus, by the way. And finally, Robin Hood. Oh my gosh, this is a childhood, like, this movie is, I watched this all the time as a kid. I love this movie a lot. Before rewatching it, so much so that I have that opening, the opening title crawl as my ringtone for a while. The little whistling from the rooster. But I mean, the musical segments I think were really good. I always get the Robin Hood and Little John walking through the forest, laughing back and forth at what the other had to say. I keep getting that stuck in my head even before I rewatch this. I would just randomly get the song stuck in my head, so I decided to rewatch it. And yes, the second time around, it definitely isn't like a 9. I would have given this like a 9 out of 10 as a kid, once again. Uh, but the second time around, I'm like, yeah, there's some issues with it. They definitely reused animation from other Disney movies, so it definitely didn't have as big of a budget. And there's not like a central story arc where Robin Hood has to learn to grow and, going after Prince John, like, is a escalating conflict. It just kind of is what it is, and it's very storybook, and how it's presented is just a couple of short stories within this greater plot that isn't like super deep or developed. It's just kind of, oh yeah, Robin Hood and Little John walking through the forest. They come across Prince John and and steal his money, and he gets pissed off, and then we get to meet some of the villagers of Nottingham and the sheriff of Nottingham, and they just kind of introduce them. And then you have the rabbit kid, it's his birthday, and him and his his older sister and one of his little sisters, and then Tuck the snitch turtle. I was watching this with a buddy, and we just had a lot of fun with the scene where they're like, "Oh yeah, don't tell Tuck anything. He's gonna tell everyone." I'm like, "Oh dang, Tuck's a snitch." So, Tuck the snitch turtle, going out, hanging out, meeting Maid Marian, and kind of having fun with her. And then you had the archery tournaments, and then Prince John kind of coming down hard on the citizens of Nottingham after the citizens of Nottingham chill out in the forest and come up with a song mocking Prince John. I thought the song was fun. I'm trying to remember it now. King, I don't know, the coward king of Nottingham or something like that. Or no, the jolly king of England. There it is. I love the songs in this movie. But then he comes down hard, and now they're all being sent to prison because Prince John's like, I'm gonna tax you a lot, and I'm just sitting here going, there's no way this is a sustainable system at all, overtaxing your citizens to where they can't pay, and then you jail them so they're not even in debt. They don't have an opportunity to make their money back to pay you back to pay their taxes. So we're just gonna get to a point where everyone's in prison, and you're suddenly your town's not going to generate any income. So what are you going to tell King Richard? He's just going to come in and it's like, hey, yo, why are we not getting any money from you? I thought we had taxes coming in. Oh, well, yeah, I decided to tax them too much and just jail the people who couldn't do it. Okay, so you just bankrupted this entire town. Way to go, dude. But once again, Prince John is a petty dude, so I know I'm talking about this way longer than I should for a recommendation. But the point is, it's very storybook. It's kind of one story after another that kind of just run and bleed into each other. I think the voice acting's fun. I really like the characters. I think the animal choices for our anthropomorphic characters are perfect for the types of characters they are. And it's a fun movie that you really it's one of my favorite, just kind of put it on and just kind of vibe to it, right? This American Graffiti, Breakfast Club, you just kind of get to vibe with it and just kind of hang out with the characters. And if the movie does it right, I tend to really enjoy these types of movies. But yeah, that is all. That's all the weekly recommendations. Check them out. Please let me know in the comments below or on Instagram what you think of these. But yeah, that's been the Cinema Lounge podcast. Check us out on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, press the subscribe button, the notification bell. Leave us a comment in the comments below. Do you like Iron Man 2? Do you hate it? Are you kind of in the middle like me about it? Where would you rank it in your MCU ranking? If you're watching on Rumble, do the very same thing. Follow us. Leave us some comments down below. If you're on Apple Podcasts, leave us a review. Maybe I'll read it if we actually start getting reviews. But leave us some reviews on Apple Podcasts. Get us some more notoriety there. Follow us on Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts. Check us out on Instagram at the Cinema Lounge, where I post occasionally. I'm not good at the social media thing, so it's a little bit of a dry well at the time, and especially now that I'm busy, it's a little drier. But that being said, I appreciate you watching and getting this far. We talked about an hour, so that's good. Check out the movies I recommended you. Watch Iron Man 2 for yourself. Make your own opinion on it, and then tell it to me, and then I'll tell you you're wrong if I disagree. But yeah, this has been the Cinema Lounge podcast. I have been your host, Garrett, and we chilled and talked about Iron Man 2. I listened back to the Shang-Chi review, and I really liked how that kind of sounded that outro. So I think that's what I'm going to do for my outro from now on. So we chilled and talked about Iron Man 2. Thank you guys for watching. I'm freaking tired as crap. It's now 10 o'clock in the evening. I'm going to get this exported and hopefully get this out to you by 9 a.m. But yeah, that's been all for today. I love you all. I hope you all have a great day, a great evening, whenever you're listening to this. If you're in school, do well in school, work hard, or not, and find another job. I don't know. Do whatever you want. It's your life. And yeah, that's been my mind just blanked. Sorry. I love you all. Have a good night, good evening, good day, good evening, and good night. And remember, uh, tell Marvel to bring back Justin Hammer because we need him. I don't know. I don't have anything quippy. I'm tired as crap. I love you all. I'm gonna keep saying it. Hopefully the music's playing out. Good night. Oi.